Welcome back to the cast, Colton Anderson Sports Talk with David Kunz. The college football playoff has been announced yesterday. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Clemson. Number 3, Notre Dame. And number 4, Oklahoma. The stage has been set. And let me get right into the beef of this segment. For the first time in playoff history, the committee's hands were tied. Totally tied. And here's what I mean. Every year previous, the committee only had a one-dimensional problem, a one-dimensional debate. The only problem they had to deal with is, should we put Team A or Team B into the playoff, Team B or Team C? Just picking teams, which in and of itself is a hard enough task, but it's fairly one-dimensional. Ohio State or Alabama last year, they picked Alabama. A few years ago, Iowa was undefeated and lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, and Iowa did not get in. One loss Ohio State that year as well. That was chaos in 2015. And perhaps the best example is TCU the first year of the playoff, being ranked by the committee numbered 3 with 1 game to go. TCU beat Iowa State by 52 points and then dropped 3 spots in the final rankings to lose out on the playoff. Selecting one team over another, Team A over Team B, is one-dimensional. But this year, the debate is two-dimensional. And it's really not overtly obvious. I don't hear many people talking about this, but here's the truth. Here's my truth, at least. And I can hear debates for other teams, but this is what I believe. Georgia is the 3rd, or at the very least, 4th best team in this country. And there's really no doubt about that. Georgia, if you lined them all up, would be right there with Notre Dame. Kirby Smart, the head coach of the Bulldogs, even though he was wrong to call that fake, was absolutely right when he said postgame his guys should be in the playoff. Georgia took it to Alabama in a fashion unlike any we've seen all year. Now, I know people are going to say, Colton, they lost. Yeah, but has anybody dominated Alabama like that at any point this year? Georgia tapped in to an energy unlike we've ever seen. And last year, Georgia was this close to winning the national championship. Georgia is better than OU. Georgia is better than Ohio State. But the reason this is a two-dimensional problem is that the committee, their hands are tied regarding Georgia. They can't possibly put them in, and I'm going to recognize that. They can't do it. It would have been egregious to put them in. They don't deserve it. Because Georgia this week was number 4. Are they going to lose and not fall? Of course they have to fall. The committee has to put them at 4 because Notre Dame totally deserves to be at 3. And so if Georgia loses, they have to fall. And some might say that they really are the 4th best team. Why can't they stay? Why can't they stay at 4 even if they lose? Well, we can't have Alabama, Georgia 3.0. They have to fall. And they would have had to have risen to number 3 in order to have the best playoff possible, in my opinion. Number 1, Bama versus number 4, Notre Dame. Number 2, Clemson versus number 3, Georgia. That's the playoff made in heaven right there. But Georgia cannot lose and then rise 1 spot. Right? So they were at 4, and they lost to Alabama. They cannot stay, even though they are one of the 4 best teams in the country, and they cannot rise because they lost, and we cannot have Alabama, Georgia again. The committee's hands are totally tied regarding Georgia. Their hands are tied because OU just happens to have the proverbial Heisman on their team, Kyler Murray. I think Tua just lost the Heisman this past week. Kyler has more yards, touchdowns, higher QBR, more completions, and a better completion percentage than Tua. Kyler is way more dynamic, prolific than Tua or Lamar Jackson, who was great at Louisville. Kyler, at least in college, is better than Baker Mayfield. So the committee's hands are totally tied on multiple levels. They cannot keep OU out of this dance, given the way they beat Texas because of Kyler Murray. Georgia is better than OU, yes. But what can you do if you're the committee? What can you do if you're college football? They made the right decision. I think Georgia is the third best team in this country. Again, my matchup made in heaven would be Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Georgia. That being said, I recognize that committee's hands are totally tied. I recognize that Georgia can't be in this thing. It would have been egregious for them to have lost and not fallen, or lost or risen to number 3. It can't happen that way. And that's fine. And I think that's a flaw. Not in the committee in the way they select things, but in the 4-team playoff. And let me propose something. I think we should expand to 6 and give the first and second ranked teams a bye. Regarding expansion, all I hear is 8 teams. I don't hear 6. I think 6 would most definitely solve the problem the committee has. Because more often than not, I think there are more than 4 teams every year that deserve it. But how often are there more than 6 that deserve a swing at the piñata? If we allow 6 in, this year, number 3 Notre Dame would play number 6 Ohio State, and number 4 OU would play number 5 Georgia. And reseed the teams after the first round, give the guys a week off, and have number 1 play number 4 and 2 play 3. To make it work, take a week out of the regular season, whether it be on the front end or the back end, because on both ends, you're playing terrible teams if you're a team that expects to be around when this sort of debate happens. I think that's the way to solve the problem. There's a giant rift this year between number 6 Ohio State and number 7 Michigan. Six teams in this playoff would have been the perfect number.